The town of Hollow Creek had long since been forgotten by the rest of the country, a place that only the desperate or foolish ever stumbled upon. Its streets were cracked and overgrown, street lamps hanging crooked, their dim light barely piercing the thick fog that seemed permanently suspended over the town. Abandoned cars, rusted and half swallowed by weeds, lined the main road, their shattered windows reflecting the gray sky like blank eyes. Even in the middle of the afternoon, an oppressive darkness hung over Hollow Creek, as if the town itself had sucked the light out of the world that Emma and Mark had been driving for hours, chasing an obscure GPS coordinate that led them far from the beaten path. Their friends had warned them not to go something about urban legends, ghost stories, but they laughed it off, brushing it away as the kind of exaggerated nonsense only small towns could produce. They weren't believers, at least not yet. The car sputtered and coughed as they turned onto a narrow, cracked road leading deeper into Hollow Creek, and Mark's brow furrowed. "Are we even on the right road?" Emma asked, her voice tight. The fog had grown thicker, curling around the car like pale fingers. Mark shook his head. "GPS says yes, just keep going." The buildings they passed were skeletal reminders of better days. The old diner had its windows shattered, red paint peeling like scabs. A grocery store sagged in on itself, the letters on its sign barely visible. Emma swore she saw movement in the darkened windows, a shadow darting away when they looked directly. "You saw that, right?" She whispered. Mark glanced quickly, shaking his head. "Probably a raccoon." He tried to laugh, but the sound came out hollow, failing to fill the tight silence inside the car. The fog seemed alive now, curling and twisting as though it had its own mind, making the street ahead disappear in rolling waves of gray. They drove slowly, headlights barely cutting through the mist. The air had that sharp, metallic tang that made Emma's stomach churn. Something about the town felt wrong, like it existed outside normal time. Suspended in perpetual decay, they came to a fork in the road. One path led to what appeared to be a crumbling church, its steeple crooked and roof sagging, the windows dark and ominous. The other path wound into dense woods, the trees black and skeletal, their branches scraping against each other like the claws of some unseen predator. Mark stopped the car, frowning at the choice. "The GPS? It's pointing us toward the church." Emma hesitated, shivering. "I don't like this. That place looks wrong." "Wrong is exactly why we're going," Mark said, forcing a grin. But even he sounded unsure, and the way his hand lingered on the car door suggested he felt it too. They parked a few yards away from the church, stepping out into the damp, cold air. Their breaths came out in white clouds, swirling around their feet like ghosts. Emma's eyes scanned the building, the peeling wood, the darkened windows, and she thought she saw a figure, a tall, thin shape standing in the doorway. She blinked, and it was gone. "Did you see that?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Probably just a shadow," Mark replied, though his voice was tinged with unease. The church door creaked loudly as they pushed it open. Inside, the smell hit them first. Damp, mold, and something far fouler like iron mixed with decay. Their flashlights flickered against the walls, revealing pews covered in a thick layer of dust, hymnals scattered and torn, some with pages blackened as though burned. The floor was warped, uneven, and their steps echoed, too loud in the empty space. Emma's light caught something on the altar, a symbol carved into the wood, jagged and grotesque. It was a circle with twisted lines reaching out like claws. She took a cautious step closer. Mark stayed behind her, uneasily brushing dust off a pew as if that could somehow protect them. A sudden noise made them both jump. Something heavy hit the floor behind them. A low scraping sound, slow and deliberate, echoed through the building. Emma spun around, her flashlight trembling in her hands. A shadow moved across the far wall, tall, distorted, inhuman. "Mark?" she whispered, fear clawing at her chest. He swallowed hard. It's just the wind," he said, but he didn't sound convinced. The temperature dropped suddenly, and their breath became more visible, fogging the air around them. The shadows seemed to creep closer, stretching toward them. Emma's stomach turned as she realized the sound wasn't random, the scraping, the whispering of the wind. It was forming words. Voices, low and guttural, almost chanting. She couldn't understand the words, but she understood the intent. Hostility, hunger. "Mark, we need to go," she hissed out. He nodded, fumbling for the door. As they stepped outside, the fog had thickened, pressing against their skin like wet cloth. Something moved in the corner of Emma's vision, a figure, hunched and twitching, emerging from the mist. It was pale, with eyes that glowed faintly red, teeth bared in a snarl. She gasped, tripping backward. Mark grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the car, but when they looked back, the figure had vanished. They jumped in the car, slamming the doors shut. Mark's hands shook on the wheel as he started the engine. The fog swirled outside, forming shapes that looked disturbingly like faces pressed against the glass. They drove without speaking, each street they passed looking the same, broken, abandoned, hostile. Emma tried to calm herself, gripping the seat. "We shouldn't have come here." "No kidding," Mark muttered. "Let's just find that coordinate and get the hell out." The GPS led them deeper into Hollow Creek, to an old, decayed house at the end of a dead-end street. Its windows were dark, like eyes watching them. The front door hung cracked, the paint peeling in long strips, the steps rotted and sagging. The wind howled through broken shutters, making the house groan as though it were alive. Emma and Mark exchanged a glance. Neither wanted to go in, but curiosity and that stupid sense of bravado pushed them forward. They stepped onto the porch. The boards creaked under their weight. Mark reached for the doorknob. It was cold, ice cold, and the moment he touched it, a sharp, metallic smell filled the air. Emma's lungs burned as she ran across the warped porch, Mark's hand clutching hers like a lifeline. The fog outside was thicker now, curling around the house like grasping fingers. Their car, which had seemed so close moments ago, now appeared miles away, shrouded in gray mist, as if the town itself were moving the world around them. The whispers had grown into a cacophony, shrill and urgent, echoing from all directions. Mark shoved open the front door, but the house resisted them. It groaned, stretched, and warped, as if alive, corridors twisting impossibly. Their flashlight beams barely pierced the darkness, flickering violently. On the walls, handprints appeared, dark, sticky, and wet, smearing downward as though something had been dragging itself along. Emma's stomach turned, bile rising, but she forced herself to keep moving. A guttural screech echoed from above, like metal scraping bone. Emma froze, her mind screaming to run, yet something more primal rooted her in place. From the staircase, a shadow moved with impossible speed. Its form blurred, skeletal arms reaching for them, fingers elongated into talons tipped with dark, sharp nails. Its eyes were pits of black, reflecting the raw terror of anyone who met its gaze. Behind it, a second figure emerged, hunched and twitching, covered in dried blood. Its mouth opened unnaturally wide, and a wet, rasping voice hissed their names. Mark grabbed Emma, yanking her backward, but the hallway stretched, expanding into an endless tunnel. The air was thick, metallic with the stench of blood, and the floor beneath them seemed to pulse, like the heartbeat of the house itself. Each step they took felt heavier, as if the house were sucking their strength away. Suddenly, a low, wet thud echoed from the ceiling above. Emma looked up in horror. Something was hanging there, a figure suspended by chains from the rafters, its body grotesquely twisted, blood dripping in slow, dark rivulets. Its eyes were wide, staring directly at them, and its mouth opened in a silent scream. Emma's stomach lurched. She pressed her hand over her mouth to stifle a scream. The shadows around them shifted and coalesced, forming a mass of humanoid figures, each more deformed and terrifying than the last. Their movements were jerky and unnatural, like marionettes controlled by some unseen puppeteer. One lunged at Mark, its claws raking along his arm, tearing flesh and leaving a glistening streak of red. He roared in pain, grabbing a piece of splintered wood from the floor and swinging it with desperate force. The creature shrieked, staggering back, but more emerged from the darkness. Emma stumbled backward, her foot hitting something soft and warm. She looked down to see a pile of bodies, twisted and bloody, as if they had been left as a warning. Some were missing eyes, others had deep gashes across their chests. The blood was fresh, pooling and dripping across the warped floorboards. Her stomach turned violently and she gagged. "We have to get out." "Now," Mark screamed, pulling her toward a side door. They burst through it and found themselves in a narrow alley behind the house. The fog outside had thickened into a nearly impenetrable wall, but for a moment they thought they were free. Then a sound like 1,000 whispers rose from the fog, growing into a deafening roar. Figures emerged pale, hunched and dripping with blood, their eyes glowing red in the dim light. Emma tried to scream, but Mark clamped a hand over her mouth. "Run," he shouted. They sprinted blindly, dodging hanging branches that clawed at their skin, tripping over roots and debris. Behind them, the figures moved with unnatural speed, closing the distance in seconds. Each step brought the smell of iron closer, the taste of blood thick in the air. They stumbled into a clearing and finally spotted their car, but the doors were open. Inside, something stirred a form hunched over the driver's seat, dripping with blood. Emma screamed as the figure turned slowly, revealing a face that was pale, twisted, and human only in the vaguest sense. Its eyes were hollow pits, and its mouth stretched impossibly wide, glistening with saliva and something darker. Mark shoved her toward the passenger seat. "Get in." He yanked open the passenger door and climbed in, slamming it shut. The engine roared to life on the first try, but as they backed out, the creatures surged forward, pressing against the windows, their hands clawing, leaving streaks of dark blood. Emma's hands trembled as she gripped the door. The windshield was smeared with sticky, wet streaks as they barreled down the foggy road. For a moment, it seemed like they had escaped. The fog thinned, the screams faded, and the streetlights ahead flickered weakly. Then a figure stepped directly in front of the car. Mark swerved violently, tires screeching, and the car skidded into the ditch. Emma was thrown against the door, pain stabbing through her shoulder. The figure approached, tall, skeletal, dripping with blood, and eyes that glowed a fierce crimson. It raised a clawed hand, and Emma felt a cold, crawling sensation as if death itself were touching her. Mark tried to fight it off, but more emerged from the fog surrounding the car. The air was filled with the scent of blood, wet and coppery, and the screams of unseen victims. Emma's vision blurred as panic took hold. They were trapped, nowhere to run, and the creatures closed in, relentless, hungry. A sudden flash of light blinded them. Emma squinted to see the church in the distance, its steeple silhouetted against a strange, flickering glow. The creatures hissed and recoiled, shrieking. Something within the church, ancient, malevolent, was pushing them back. Mark seized the moment. "Go, now," he shouted. They abandoned the car, running toward the church, stumbling through mud and blood-soaked ground. Inside, the building pulsed with dark energy. Shadows writhed along the walls, whispers rising to deafening screams. Emma felt hands claw at her from the darkness, trying to pull her back, but Mark's grip was unyielding. The altar, previously carved with grotesque symbols, now glowed faintly red, a circle of protection against the horrors outside. The creatures pressed against the doors and windows, pounding and screeching, but they could not enter. Breathless and shaking, Emma sank to the floor, trembling as the chanting grew louder, almost intelligible now. It spoke of pain, hunger, and vengeance, calling the town to life with blood and death. Outside, the fog swirled violently, shadows moving like tides of darkness. Emma realized with horror that Hollow Creek wasn't abandoned. It had been waiting, feeding, shaping itself for them. Mark grabbed her hand. "We survived, but it's not over. We can't leave this place." "Not really." Emma looked at him, blood still dripping from his arm, eyes wide with terror. The whispering had slowed, almost contemplative, as though the town itself were observing its prey, waiting for the next moment to strike. And then, from the corner of the church, a shadow detached itself from the wall, a figure tall, skeletal, its red eyes blazing like coals. It stepped forward, and the door slammed shut with a deafening crash. Emma screamed, the sound swallowed by the darkness, as the figure reached out, its claws glinting in the dim red light. The last thing she saw before everything went black was the circle on the altar glowing brighter, burning with a strange, terrible energy, hinting at both salvation and doom. The town of Hollow Creek remained silent once more, the fog rolling over the streets, hiding the horrors within, waiting for the next lost souls to wander in.
Please like and subscribe channel Fear Frequency for more horror stories. Thank you.